Good afternoon. Rich Nass, Executive Vice President with Open Systems Media and leader of the Embedded Computer Design franchise. Here for this week's Embedded Executive, is usually a podcast. We're doing a test with video this week to see how receptive it is and if people really care what I look like. This is the COVID-19 version. No, I have not had a haircut in a really long time. I don't normally look like this. But my special guest this week is Jean Labrosse, who you probably know is the former founder, CEO of Micrium, vice president at Silicon Labs. What was your title?
No. I just a distinguished engineer. I was a software architect at Silicon Lab for a couple of years.
Okay, I thought you were actually the president for a while.
No.
Just kidding.
No, Tyson is awesome for that.
I would definitely agree with that. So what initiated this was we were chatting about a podcast I did a few weeks ago with Gurjit Singh, the CEO of Link Software, and the topic there was open source. And you had some interesting comments with respect to that. Repeat back what you said to me earlier.
Okay, so basically, I agree. I mean, there's certainly some benefits with open source. With respect to Link Software, is kind of a they support open source software, but it's all encompassed or all encapsulated inside of a framework where if something goes wrong with the open source software, then the framework, the environment actually catches that and terminates the offending software. So that's fine, except if it's medical equipment and you're killing the application that actually is performing the bad code, then I'm not sure that that's necessarily a good thing either. So as much as you could support open source with a framework like that, it's still a problem when it comes to running certain types of applications, because if it crashes, you could still have some nasty thing. Now, if as it crashes, the software actually takes care of putting I/O devices, specifically actuators, in safe positions, or even stopping actuators from continuing to operate, then maybe that's a safe thing to do. So I'm not exactly sure how Lynx handles all that.
Now, is there the expectation with open source that even though you didn't pay for it, it's supposed to work right every time, all the time?
Well, there's no guarantee, right? Who guarantees that? I mean, it's on the website. You don't know what the source is sometimes. You don't know who's going to support it. There's no indemnification. If something goes wrong, who do you call? So you're really on your own type of thing. So you get what you pay for, basically.
Okay. Now I know you know a lot more about this, being with what happened at Silicon Labs near the end of your tenure. Describe for the audience what happened with that code.
So basically, the Micrium software was maintained by Silicon Lab for the past 3 years. As is, we were keep on selling licenses, irrespective of the platform, irrespective of the CPU. So it didn't matter whether it was a ARM Cortex from NXP, ST, anybody's ARM Cortex or Renesas RX or any platform. Silicon Lab was still able to support and sell that through the Micrium office here in Western Florida. And that continued for a number of years, and eventually they decided to take a snapshot of the Micrium software and use that for their own use. So for all their protocol stacks, the wireless protocols, they're using the Micrium RTOS internally. And in fact, they made some modifications to the coding style and to maintain the same coding style they have throughout the company. So there's really 3 versions of the Micrium software now. So there's the Silicon Lab version they modify for their own use. There's the Micrium software that they recently placed as open source on the Silicon Lab website. And finally, there's another version that a company called Western Embedded here in Florida, which are all ex-Micrium employees. They started a company to support current customers that are using, current or future customers that are using the original Micrium software. So they created a version called Cesium, and Cesium is exactly the same thing as the MicroCOS and the MicroCTCP, except now it's being supported and only modified only modified when it's absolutely necessary. They're not going to modify the code. It's not anybody could actually modify the code. It's just, you know, those engineers that will do that. And case in point, in the case of the RTOS itself, they will contact me and then they will ask me if I'm okay to make certain changes to the RTOS. But throughout this whole thing, they're maintaining the code base, they're maintaining the coding style that we've been very much famous for, as well as documentation. So documentation will also be maintained by these guys.
What about as new devices become available? Will support be added for that?
Absolutely. So as new devices are introduced, if customers would like to have ports on these new devices, of course, they will support those new devices as necessary.
Now, you mentioned the documentation. We all know documentation is not important, right?
Of course not. Yeah, now the big trend nowadays is, oh, an API is all you need. And believe me, I just don't believe in that whole concept. You don't get to see the whole picture when you're just seeing an API set. I like to have, as you probably know from my books, I like to have a lot of illustrations explaining concepts. And with the APIs, you don't get the whole picture. And that's what I think documentation and illustrations are really good at doing. And very often, a lot of open source is not explained. Here's the source code, you're on your own, you got to figure it out. There's limited documentation. A lot of it is in the open source itself. I personally like to have a separate document that describes how everything works so people could take that over and understand the limitations and all that.
Why are you in the minority there?
Good question. I don't know. I don't know. Why do you think I'm in the minority?
Well, I hate to say people are lazy, but you know, we used to use the excuse that it was good job security to not document any of your code. But is that a fallacy?
Well, I mean, I think it's a shame if that's the case, I think it's a shame that that's the mentality still. I don't think that's what it is. I think everybody's pressed to hurry up and get their products out the door as quickly as possible. And, you know, you have to cut corners at some point. I mean, I think that's a big problem with the open sources. Unfortunately, there's nobody to indemnify you on the code. There's nobody to support you necessarily. You got to go through third parties. All the different sources of open source, the coding style is all different. So you got to put all that together. You could get name clash for namespace. I mean, there's tons of issues. So to me, I'm very surprised. I've never really been a big proponent of open source for all these reasons.
Very good. Well, thanks, John. I hope you're staying safe down there in Florida.
I sure am. Same for you.
Thank you very much. This has been the video version of Embedded Insiders. That was Jean LaBrosse, and I'm Rich Ness. Have a great day, John.
Thank you. You too.